Hello, hi, I'm Sophie. Welcome or welcome back. I have cancer. You already know this, perhaps.
Bibliosophie.
So almost exactly 6 months ago, I made a first video announcing that I had cancer, and I gave some details, but not that many. I have continued to be on YouTube since, and I've made quite a lot of vlogs, and I have continued to talk about my cancer and cancer treatment in various spurts as they have arisen. So if you are a regular watcher of my channel, this will not be news to you, but I thought it was time, 6 months into this journey, to put it charitably, to give an update, to give kind of a more comprehensive chronicle of what has happened, what's going to happen as far as I can tell, and answer some questions. Uncharacteristically for myself, I have made an outline. I am feeling overwhelmed by this video for obvious reasons. It feels like I need to cover everything, and that simply will not be the case. So you are going to allow me imperfections. I'm going to allow myself imperfections. We're going to get through this together. What do I actually have? I mentioned in my first video that I have lymphoma, a non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Specifically, I have a large B-cell lymphoma, and even more specifically than that, I have a relatively rare subtype, which is called primary mediastinal lymphoma, large B-cell lymphoma, which means that I have tumor that has congregated in my mediastinum, my chest cavity. Several people have asked me how I knew that I had cancer, what's kind of the backstory, how did I get diagnosed, etc. So here it is. I started feeling some pain in my sternum at the end of May 2024. There was one day, actually the day after my birthday, that I felt some pain, and it didn't last long. It lasted about 12 hours, went away, so I didn't think too much of it. I was finishing the school year. I was finishing a difficult spring in many ways with a lot of stress. And in the past, stress has manifested in my body in various aches and pains, especially around the shoulders, kind of intercostal spine. So I figured I'm burnt out, I'm stressed, I'm tired. It's not going anywhere. This pain is probably just a stress response. I didn't notice anything in June. In July, I went to France and did what I usually do, which is I went swimming. And that was the first big alarm bell for me because I couldn't swim. I could not, no matter how hard I tried, catch my breath. And that was completely new to me. So I went to the doctor. I went to our local general practitioner there. And I asked if I should get a chest x-ray. He thought not. He thought it was just lingering bronchial infection. I had gotten briefly sick a few months earlier. I had a cough. He said, no, you're young, you're healthy, you're not a smoker, you don't need a chest x-ray, it's fine. He prescribed me a steroid inhaler, and he said over the course of the month, it'll get better. I didn't press it because, quite frankly, I didn't want to need a chest x-ray. So I thought, okay, fine, I'll do my inhaler course regimen. And then we start about 2 months of fretting and gaslighting because I constantly wondered, actually, is it getting easier? I was not constantly having sternum pain, but it was occurring sometimes. So I knew something was wrong, but I knew that maybe I had some lingering bronchial things. Maybe it was going to get better with my inhaler. I was generally otherwise feeling perfectly fine. I was starting to have a harder and harder time breathing, but it was very, very subtle. There wasn't an extremely acute thing that was telling me, okay, something is absolutely wrong. If you don't know me, I'm a singer. I'm an opera singer, and I could still sing very, very well. But by September, I started noticing that I couldn't sing the same lines of music that I had previously done in one breath. I no longer could do. And that's when the alarm bells really went off. And I did finally go to my GP here in New York. I was due for an annual physical checkup anyway, and he immediately sent me to get a chest x-ray. So after that was done, I, half an hour later, got a chest x-ray. The following morning, I woke up to 3 voicemails from my doctor saying the chest ray is not good. I think, did I say chest ray? Chest x-ray is not good. And that was my first moment of, oh. I remember that afternoon, it was a Tuesday, I was walking home and staring a lot into the middle distance. What if something is wrong? He told me to come into the office the next day. I actually went to a dance rehearsal the next morning. I had a photo shoot, and I went from rehearsal and photo shoot directly to the office, and he told me to go straight to the emergency room to get a CT scan. I did not leave the hospital for another 2 weeks, and it was hard. It was really, really hard. The first week, I got a CT scan, I got a biopsy. I was also under observation from a bunch of different specialties, cardiology, pulmonology. I went in with chest pain, and so they were wondering, do I have a cardiac problem? I was kind of worked up by all sorts of different specialties. But quickly it became clear that oncology was going to be the specialty treating me, but not quickly enough. A week in your life is not that long. It's very, very long when you're hospitalized, and it's very, very long when you're hospitalized and you are waiting to hear back about an abnormality in various scans. I had never been to the hospital before as a patient, and I had such a hard time. I got very depressed very quickly. People around me were very kind and helpful, but I had such a hard time with the noise and the lights. I was basically constantly sleep deprived because there's always these beeps and sounds going off all the time. And quite frankly, for obvious reasons, I was worried. I'll mention some symptoms that I did not feel, because with a large B-cell lymphoma, other typical symptoms that take people to the doctor for a diagnosis include night sweats, fever and temperature changes, weight loss, I've listed them, swelling, of course, in the lymph nodes, and fatigue. And I had none of those specific symptoms. Fatigue, yes. I suspect that some of the fatigue that I have felt for the past, I don't know how long, and have sometimes talked about on this channel, has definitely been linked to my growing lymphoma. But I also live in New York. I also am an active opera singer who's also doing a doctorate, who also teaches, who is just kind of constantly burnt out. So I just thought that it was burnout. I didn't think that I had cancer. I had a 14 centimeter by 7 centimeter by 5 centimeter tumor. I have made a helpful little box. Please compliment me. She is pretty misshapen, but I made this by myself. So this was, upon my original CT scan, basically the size of my tumor, give or take, obviously, probably less angular. And that's huge. That's gigantic. Large B-cell lymphomas are aggressive, fast-growing tumors, and they can get quite big quite quickly. I was stage 1E, which means that it had not really spread, but there was some pleural effusion and pericardial. So I had some liquid in the lungs and kind of around my heart as a result of my lymphoma. The reason I couldn't breathe was quite simply I had this much extra stuff in my chest cavity underneath my sternum, and also liquid in my lungs and around my heart. So it's no surprise that I was having a harder and harder time breathing. Part 2, treatment. I was very lucky in a bunch of different ways, in that lymphoma has a lot of treatments that are pretty regimented, typical protocols, and I quickly fell into a typical protocol. There wasn't the question of, are we going to do this treatment or that treatment? It was sort of go with the flow. I also was lucky that I was in a very good hospital with a very good medical team specializing in my cancer, and I felt very safe and comfortable with my primary doctor who was going to be taking care of my case. He was very matter of fact, very informative, but I didn't have to wonder about a lot of things. I didn't feel the need to second guess him. I felt respected, and so I didn't have all of these questions about what I was going to do. The other thing that made a very dark time much less dark is that typically the treatment protocol for my type of lymphoma is very successful, something like 80% to 90% treatable and in fact curable with the chemo course that I did. What was that chemo course, you ask? Let me tell you. I did dose-adjusted R-EPOCH. This is a very long infusion process. I did a 5-day, almost continuous infusion. I did it inpatient in hospital, and I did all of my cycles of chemo inpatient in hospital, which was good and bad. The good aspect is that I was getting very high doses of very difficult chemo drugs, but at a lower speed. So I typically was not getting super sick, but it sucked to be in the hospital, quite honestly. The drugs involved, if you want to know, and I'm super curious always about the various kind of chemo combinations, so I'm going to tell you, are on day 1, you have immunotherapy drug rituximab or Rituxan for 3 or 4 hours the first time, for a longer period of time because they increase the speed of infusion later on. Then you have 4 days of doxorubicin, vincristine, and etoposide. These come in giant bags, and it was very impressive also because it's this orange-red color. Doxorubicin is this bright red drug, and it is very impressive. And I was getting liter bags of this, just a continuous infusion, 24 hours a day, with, like half an hour in between while they changed out the infusion bags. That whole time, also prednisone, a steroid, twice a day in quite a heavy dose. And as a last infusion on day 5, cyclophosphamide, which is another very heavy drug that I definitely felt the effects of in an hour infusion. In addition to that, various pre-meds, anti-nausea, quite a lot of anti-nausea medication with a cyclophosphamide, a medication to protect my bladder, Benadryl and painkillers, kind of various helpful medications, antibiotic and antiviral as well. Did I forget anything? Oh, and often also hydration. Hydration is really key for a slightly easier time. I got all of this through a PICC line, which I happen to have still, or again, installed, so I can show you. This is a peripherally inserted central catheter. It is a little tunnel that leads to my main trunk, venous trunk, and it kind of protects my veins because all of these medications are, of course, highly toxic and they cannot be administered directly into the veins. A lot of people who get infused chemo have a port, which is usually placed somewhere around here, but I never did. I got various PICC lines. I would get a PICC line put in every time I went into the hospital, and then it would be removed once I was done with my final infusion. This is a 21-day cycle, give or take, depending on what your blood cell counts do. We'll talk about this again soon. But basically, 1 short week of chemo, 2 weeks or so of recovery, and then over again. Effectively, I did shorter than 21-day cycles, especially at the beginning, because I would recover fast enough, and you're just trying to hit your body as much as you can, as quickly as you can, without letting it recover too much, because the more the rest of you recovers, the more your cancer cells can also recover. 1 day after the end of my last dose of chemo, I would also get a shot to help boost my blood cell regrowth. And in addition to that, Lupron shots to stop me from ovulating. And that also comes with its own set of side effects. Let's talk about the side effects. With each cycle, I had slightly different reactions, both physically and mentally. But overall, I tried to list last night kind of everything I can remember feeling and having. During chemo, swelling, because of the steroids, and also to a certain extent, I think, from getting just so much liquid infused in you, both as hydration and in chemotherapy form. Fatigue, part of that was also just being impatient and not sleeping very well. I was in a single room for chemotherapy, but there's only so much you can do with. You're not at home. Insomnia, also because of the steroids, some bloating, some constipation the first time, and that's basically it. I felt a little nausea, especially later, but not that much, and that was also because I was pretty heavily medicated for nausea. Immediately after, and then kind of weeks and weeks after, fatigue. Definitely fatigue, body weirdness, and especially after my first hospital stay. I had been in the hospital for 2 weeks. I was severely sleep deprived. I had gone in a normal person, quote unquote, and I had come out having finished my first cycle of chemotherapy. And so I felt very weird in my body. Some of that I think was just mental, emotional, and some of it I think was actually physiological. I felt a lot of weird alienation in my body, and that went away after a couple of days, but it was very interesting throughout chemo to see the ways in which my body reacted, didn't react, surprised me. Bodies are weird is kind of the conclusion I've come up with, and how much you can be not in yourself. So I've sought really to write about and describe and memorize the ways in which things felt weird and off, and how and why. Blood. I mentioned we would talk again about blood cells. This definitely depletes your blood cells, of course, and increasingly so. The dose of chemo is upped. So you are getting more and more chemotherapy, and your body is also getting weaker and weaker. And definitely my blood cell counts were depleted from the get-go, from the first chemo cycle, but it got worse and worse and worse and worse. So I did have to have a red blood cell transfusion and a platelet transfusion ultimately. But it kind of went like this. It would go back up thanks to the granular growth factor. But definitely the trend was, despite getting my blood cells back to a workable situation where I could go back into chemo again, the trend was definitely I was getting weaker for longer, and it would take longer and longer over the different cycles for me to get my blood counts up again. Hair loss, obviously. My hair has been growing back for about 2 months now, but I did lose my hair. I started losing my hair about 2 weeks after my first cycle, so it's pretty quick. I did not know it would be quite as painful as it was. It was actually, I don't think it is for everybody, but for me it was actually quite painful physically. I mean, let's leave the emotions out of it even. It feels like if you have had long hair and you pull it up very tightly for a long time, and then you undo it at the end of the day, and then you're like moving it around, that kind of delicious pain of finally letting your hair down after it's been pulling, it felt like that. But it wouldn't stop. And that's kind of one of the ways in which chemo is so disconcerting, because you feel things that are familiar in a lot of ways. You just haven't felt them in that way and for that situation and quite as endlessly. Another thing I felt, especially in the first few chemos, was a lot of body pain, a lot of body aches and kind of tenderness, joint pain, which I have felt muscle pain before, but it felt very disconcerting for it to be so much, so unrelentingly and out of nowhere, seemingly. I hadn't exercised into that pain. Taste. My taste changed immediately in a way that was very tragic for me. I am made of bread and butter. These are the cornerstone of my diet, and immediately both were actually quite revolting to me. Butter tasted rancid to me, and I just couldn't eat the same things. I never had much nausea. I mentioned during treatment, but even when I got home, I almost never had to take any anti-nausea medication, so I was very lucky in that regard. But I definitely had some major appetite changes, and that would depend on the day within a cycle, and it would depend on the cycle. It was a little bit seemingly aleatoric, but in general, actually, bland food was really difficult for me. I needed flavor because bland food would taste really rancid. If it didn't have enough, especially umami, I wasn't interested. Pain in the joints, I said. Swelling also, because especially of the stimulating factor. Mouth ulcers. This happened after a few days. After each cycle of chemo without fail, they got worse and worse. Also, I just, tried to keep my mouth as clean as possible with mouthwash to kind of help. I never took anything else for them. It made eating really difficult for usually a couple of days, but it wasn't debilitating for me. For some people, sometimes it can be a hugely debilitating thing. It meant that I didn't really want to eat because it was just too painful to eat. I didn't have much appetite loss. I had some appetite changes, but I was hungry every day. Usually most of my appetite loss was in fact when I was in the hospital inpatient, because I would get depressed from being in the hospital. Cyclophosphamide made urination painful. I mentioned needing to protect my bladder, and it made me also need to pee really badly for about 12 hours after that last infusion. And that also got worse with each subsequent dose and it being upped. And speaking of my urine, because of course you wanted to hear a lot about my urine, I had kind of orange reddish urine as a result of the drugs. They told me I might have pinkish orangish tears, but I never noticed that. So I was a little disappointed. I thought I was going to have some metal red tears, but those never came to fruition. Now my body fluids were toxic in a new way, and that was really weird emotionally, actually, to think, can I even be touched? There is an emotional load of, I'm immunocompromised all of a sudden, and heavily so I don't want to touch the world, but also I am this toxic creature. My sweat is toxic. And that was a sort of hurdle to get across. People were allowed to touch me, but when I was first given kind of the full list of side effects and things to know about myself, I thought, oh my God, I'm a monster. I'm this like radioactive monster whose sweat is toxic. I had bruised nail beds, and that got worse. Basically you can imagine that everything just always got worse as my chemo journey went along. Some weight loss, but not too much. I got freckles. They're a relatively, I think, infrequent side effect, but I got new freckles. So I had kind of new splotches, especially on my face, but not exclusively. Also, I noticed them on my fingers from a couple of the different chemo drugs, neuropathy, pain, and loss of sensation in my hands and feet. This is from the vincristine, and in fact, we stopped upping the dosage for the vincristine and then removed it from my cocktail because I was losing too much sensation. So I think after the third chemo, I was having a hard time even opening my pill bottles because I was so weakened. In general, weakened. Some days I was feeling very, very weak, and so there was all sorts of types of weaknesses, definitely a lot of heart weakness, very erratic heartbeat, heart rate, and tension, blood pressure. So that made certain things really difficult. I absolutely could not climb stairs. I couldn't even go up tiny hills. I couldn't put in my contacts without sitting down. I couldn't drink any type of caffeine. In general, I don't tend to drink very much caffeine anyway, but if I had even like a cup of tea, my what's it called? My heart rate would just start shooting up, and I could like see sound. I would get extremely high from caffeine in ways that I haven't felt since. And we were definitely really watching out for heart weakness in general, especially when I still had some liquid around my heart. I had extremely soft skin. I lost hair not just on my head, but eventually kind of all of my face. That took much longer. The eyebrows and eyelashes came later. And that was difficult to deal with emotionally, much harder than the head hair. I lost kind of some hair everywhere on my body, and mostly my hair was just not growing back. So I shaved my legs when I got back from the hospital, and then I kind of just didn't shave them again for 3 months. And sometimes your skin can get very dehydrated and kind of rough textured because of chemo, but in my case it actually gave me very beautiful skin, partially because it was hairless, but also I think because it was kind of very sensitive and fragile. Also was not hanging out in pollution and in the sun a lot. So the result was that I had like just baby soft skin kind of everywhere. I was cold a lot. This was partially because of my blood cell problems, but also some weight loss. And when I was in the cold, I was getting hot flashes. As I mentioned, I am still in a chemically induced menopause, essentially. And so I get infrequent hot flashes, but I do. Muscle stiffness, and that has gotten worse. I haven't been in chemo for now 4 months. I'm recording this on April 1st. And yet, 3 months. 3 months. 3 full months, sorry. And yet I still have some massive kind of muscle and joint stiffness. And guess what? It got worse. And as I mentioned, kind of weird alienation. So I followed this chemo protocol for 5 cycles over the course of 3 months. And then I stopped because it wasn't working as it needed to. And that sucked. It's not nice getting a cancer diagnosis. It is definitely not nice getting the news that the treatment that works in the vast majority of cases isn't working on you. And it's so much harder when you're in the hospital and hopped up on steroids and severely depleted physically by that treatment. Also in the midst of winter. So January was really hard. End of December and beginning of January were very dark for me. I'm not gonna lie. We very quickly decided with my doctor that I would, as my next big treatment, start CAR-T as a potentially curative treatment. CAR-T is chimeric antigen receptor T cell treatment, and it is basically a genetically modified T cell of my own. My T cells were harvested in February. They were sent off to a lab. They were modified over the course of a month, and then just over a week ago, they were reinfused, or technically re-injected into me. And this could potentially cure me. It is really cool. I feel really privileged that I get to have this pretty new treatment. It's under 10 years old, that is potentially curative. And I find it so cool that it's my own cells that are targeting my cancer. That said, I was obviously not thrilled to find out that I needed to change treatment. I was also not thrilled to find out that I would need to change medical team, because not every hospital does this. So the good news is I really liked my first doctor, and I really like my new doctor as well. It was also helpful that they really were telling me exactly the same things. But the actual transition was hard. It was just an additional layer of emotional labor to deal with in the midst of everything. I needed to recover from chemo before starting the CAR-T, and then you also have to factor in a month or so of mutation time, essentially. So that's why I only started at the very end of March, my new treatment. The good news is I did recover really nicely from my chemo cycles, so I started this treatment in really, really good shape. This is not 100% foolproof effective, or rather, if it's curative, it can be 100% curative. But that is only the case in about 40 to 60% of people. And those are odds that are not nothing at all. They're not bad even. But you want to hear higher odds when you're in treatment for cancer, quite honestly. So that was also really difficult to hear in January. And I'm scared. I'm scared it won't work. It's not the end of the line for me if it doesn't work, but I remain nervous, of course. In between, I also got 2 bridging infusions of immunotherapy, which further decreased my tumor a little bit. The silver lining of this is that it was not all for nothing. The chemotherapy did decrease my tumor and in fact helped to put me in a very good kind of optimal position for CAR T. So even though it was not the only thing I needed, it did help. And that's partially how I climbed out of the hole that I was in emotionally. In January, it was helpful to realize, okay, yes, the chemo was a failure, but it was not actually a total failure. I had 3 days of much lower dose chemotherapy prior to the re-injection of the CAR T, 2 days of rest, and then 8 days ago, I had a very anticlimactic injection of just 2 blurry little syringes of cells that have been replicating in my system since. The 2 main side effects that are observed are CRS, cytokine release syndrome, which is basically an inflammatory response from the body, and neurotoxicity. This can be mild or very, very serious in very kind of few cases, but you are very heavily monitored. I've been able to do this all outpatient, but I have been going into the hospital every day to do blood tests and do neurological tests to make sure that I'm still kind of my normal me. So far, I have been coming out of this with flying colors. One of the appeals of something like this is that it's a much, much more targeted therapy. So the side effects of chemo are because you are removing a mouse by setting an entire house on fire, essentially. And this is just, looking for the mouse. Which is nice. I am tired because the chemo did deplete my white blood cells again, actually all of my blood cells again, and also the CAR T. But this is also kind of partially by design. So, I'm on the lookout for fever and things like this. I'm heavily immunocompromised and will be for a very long time. And I'm definitely feeling some fatigue, but this has been quite chill, which is nice. Okay, let's talk about the dark stuff, because of course there has been plenty of dark stuff emotionally. I have overall not had too bad a time in all of this. I'm very lucky in all sorts of ways, and I'll kind of get into it. But this has been manageable, but it hasn't been easy, of course. So how have I been coping? I think what has helped me most is focusing on details, being very, very specific and very detail oriented. And this is definitely helpful in terms of the physical side effects and makes them feel more manageable. It has made it easier to communicate, of course, with doctors, but also from my own emotional kind of regulation, realizing what exactly is this pain? What am I feeling? Trying to analyze it and recognize it as transient. This is where cancer pains associated with chemotherapy, unless they become major disabling events, which is possible, are easier to deal with than chronic pain because there is an end. Feeling big emotions. I had various questions about kind of how did I deal with emotional regulation and all the big emotions of fear and frustration, etc. Feeling them. Honestly, being allowed to feel them, allowing myself and having the luck of being in an environment where I was allowed to feel them. I felt very scared, very frustrated at various moments. I think, as I mentioned, probably the darkest moment was in January. I think it was harder in many ways than at the end of September when I was first diagnosed. But I was allowed to feel fear. Going back to specificity, I also liked to, for myself, separate as much as possible the feelings of emotions. I was afraid of dying, but I didn't think I was going to die. And being able to articulate to others, I'm afraid of death, but I'm not afraid of death because I think I'm going to die right now. I'm just afraid of death. And being able to separate those subtly different things helped. I am frustrated because I'm tired. I'm frustrated because I feel like a failure. I felt like a failure because I didn't respond to chemo, but trying to really always specify as much as possible, dig into the emotions. I was asked by a couple of people if counseling and mental health help were offered to me, and they were. They were offered to me by both of the hospitals with which I've worked, and also by the Lymphoma and Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, whatever order it is. So from various angles, I was offered counseling. I never took it, actually. I had already a relationship with a therapist that I was not really seeing very much, but I started doing some check-ins with her kind of monthly, facing the idea of death very head-on, very matter-of-factly, and facing the idea of suffering. I'm so thankful that when I was waiting for a diagnosis in September, I was able to, before my mother came to join me, talk to her on the phone. And obviously we were both scared and stressed, but we could have very, very clear-eyed conversations in which we could say, okay, so logistically speaking, what do we do if I die? Because of course, no parent wants to bury their child, and no parent wants to really think about that, but you have to think about kind of basic logistics, and that really, really, really helped. I'm getting emotional thinking about it. Writing. I was writing beforehand, but I started writing even more, and I started writing even more in January, end of December, January, because I was in such a low place. I have wanted to document this. It has been my obsession to try to create something out of this. You don't have to, obviously. You shouldn't owe it to the world to make something beautiful out of your cancer, but it has helped me. I have wanted to aestheticize, and by aestheticize, I don't necessarily make easy or charming cancer, but I have wanted to make it aesthetically important. And that has involved filming myself, photographing myself, writing about my sensations, again, with as much specificity as I can possibly muster, even when I was feeling really, really tired, to just try to have the raw material of something. I have been continuing to sing. And that was very, very important to me, especially in the hospital. I could keep singing, so I did. I think it's very important to try to have as much continuity with the things that are important, but also a physical practice, I think, has really, really helped me. And specifically, an artistic outlet, I mean, is kind of perfect. An artistic outlet that comes from the center of my body. It's very poetic. This part of my body is the cancerous part, but it's also the part that I make my art with. And that has kind of helped to deal with some of the alienation of cancer. I have wanted to remain fiercely myself, and I have done so, which has also meant that I have never wanted to feel like cancer was this thing put on me. I own my cancer. I made it. I want it gone, but I have never felt invaded by my cancer. I think it depends on the type of cancer you have, of course. If you have a solid tumor that is then kind of encroaching upon you, you might have a different relationship. But mostly, as much as I definitely want my cancer cells killed, I have never felt a disjuncture between me and cancer. And I have also never wanted to think of myself as fighting cancer. I want to cure my cancer, treat my cancer, but I don't want to feel like a soldier. I don't like, personally, the metaphors around fighting cancer and being a fighter against cancer. If it works for you, wonderful, that's great, fabulous. It doesn't work for me. I don't want to fight myself. I have also, in my writing and in my practice and in my relationship to my body, tried to keep as many things as possible kind of enmeshed with one another. I have tried to stay myself in how I dress, in how I look. Let's get back to the hair issue. I am very lucky that I have a lovely shaped head. There's no way around it. And look, quite frankly, I am young and I am attractive. And it is so much easier to have no hair when you have those factors on your side. I am not in an environment where a super normative appearance is required of me. And I have previously shaved my head to about this length or even shorter by choice. So when I was told that I was going to lose my hair, it was nothing, basically, to me. It was just a total non-event. And that's huge because hair is not important, except it is extremely important, right? So that aspect was very helpful. I think I have a lot of advantages on my side there, but also I have tried to keep a certain amount of flexibility about what I should look like, what I can look like. And I'm not gonna lie, it got hard. So shaving my head initially, not a big deal. It was actually a really joyous occasion. My friend did it. I felt hot. I felt great. I thought I looked great afterwards. But then you lose even more hair. And so this is not the same as having absolutely no hair and months of that. Then losing my eyebrows, losing my eyelashes, that was difficult. I definitely entered into alien queen territory. And again, I tried to have some fun with it. I tried to look up images of bald, beautiful people, but even kind of creatures to help aestheticize what my new reality. It was so important, like kind of aggressively important for me not to wear wigs. And I wear wigs as part of my job. So normally that's not an issue, but not only did I not want to have to wear a wig on a daily basis to kind of normalize myself, I actually couldn't even have fun with them. It felt like I was betraying myself in a way. So that was an aspect where I was really, really kind of vehement and reactionary. There were various things like that. I did feel kind of unsexed and agender, but as much as possible, I've tried to have some flexibility about the kind of preconceptions of who I am and what I need to look like. And yet, for all of my basically level-headedness, I went insane every time I went into the hospital. I could not deal with it. That has been the hardest aspect. And as I mentioned, I really liked my care team. I felt really well followed and really well respected, but it's the actual structure of the hospital. What I have not been able to handle at all is the big emotion of waiting. And it continues to make me insane, essentially. It's not helped by the fact when I was in hospital that I was also on very high doses of steroids. I have found waiting in waiting rooms, even when they're nice waiting rooms, so hard. I just cannot handle it. And that has been just this soul-crushing element. I have never wondered, can I make it? I've never had the moment of, I cannot do this treatment, I don't want to do this treatment. I've never had this sensation that I needed to stop treatment. I've in fact always been very excited and relieved to get treatment. Partially that's having manageable physical side effects, but treatment in and of itself has not felt like a chore. I have cried at every chemo, including the most recent, much easier, lower doses of chemo. It has still produced in me a weird emotional reaction. So it hasn't been easy, but I at least have never felt like I was fighting treatment. I have not hated treatment. I have suffered from treatment, but it hasn't been this monster to overcome. What has been a monster to overcome is the waiting and infrastructure of in and around treatment and kind of hospitalization. I have to just acknowledge a tremendous number of privileges that have helped make things easier for me. Youth, right? Overall health. Apart from a little smidge of cancer, actually, a very chunky smidge of cancer, I'm in great health and I recover very quickly. I have no medical trauma. I think probably do. My hospitalizations got harder and harder because just being back in a hospital now is kind of mildly traumatic for me. But I had no pre-existing medical trauma. I had no reason really to mistrust doctors. I have felt totally respected by the doctors who have treated me. I have felt very, very respected and heard by my treatment teams. And I know that that's not a given for everybody. I've felt a tremendous amount of continuity between my personal inner circle and their reactions and my own and my doctors. So there hasn't been this constant noise of people having different opinions, people having butting in, and that has helped. I had a pre-existing community that was really large in all sorts of different ways, different tiers of community. I have some really clutch, really close friends, family members, significant other, chosen family that I love and have felt tremendous love and support from, but also people that I'm not as close to, who have been so supportive from afar, in kind of different levels. So including viewers like you, I have felt a tremendous sense of community. It was a really beautiful kind of test of what family I have built for myself. I have proximity and accessibility to hospitals, great hospitals. I didn't think about going to France really seriously to treat my cancer because New York has phenomenal specialists in my field. I have insurance. I could afford to not work very much. I have not been able to work that much, certainly not as a singer, which has been very hard, but I could afford to do that. My various employers and collaborators have been not just understanding and supportive, but have been empowering. I had to cancel a bunch of things when I was initially in the hospital, but I didn't just have no pushback. I had people actively trying to make things possible for me. I had people accommodating me, so I was able to keep just a couple of gigs, move things around, getting people to cover for me, because my employers and collaborators wanted to accommodate me as much as possible. And that also made me feel just tremendously lucky. There's a massive effect that happens. So the more help you have, the less help you need in many ways. As I mentioned, my doctors were always kind of very closely aligned in what their opinions were. So I did get a second opinion upon initial diagnosis, but there was never fretting about treatment choice. Being a cancer patient puts you in a very weird metaphorical position, in a weird position of your own making, and in a position in terms of how the world sees you. And I've definitely had to navigate that, and as I mentioned, try to remain fiercely myself. But it's been weird. It's been hard. Looking sick, I mentioned kind of the difficulties of looking sick. You look like a weird alien baby. But also, when in February my hair was starting to grow back, in March, I actually started feeling really bad about not looking sick because I wasn't cured. I thought that I would start getting my hair back because I had completely done away with my cancer and I was done. That chapter of my life was going to be over. And it's not as simple as that. So actually, looking healthy again has been its own weird thing. And even when I was looking more overtly sick, not looking very fatigued was mostly positive, but wondering if I was kind of sick enough. You're constantly battling what is expected of you, what you expect of yourself. Do you want to look good? I kind of initially had this plan that I was going to have no side effects from chemo and I was going to be great. It was going to be easy. I was going to have an easy time with cancer. That's not what happened, obviously. I think I was lucky to have an easier time than a lot of people do, but you're kind of trying to navigate like how much performance do you want to give? Do you feel like you need to give? I think I can accurately say that I have not had to perform much. I have not felt, at least, like I was pretending. I have wondered, about other people's chemo dosages and different cancers, chemo protocols. That's why I mentioned mine. I got very, very curious, and some of it was general curiosity, but some of it I think felt like I was in competition. Oh, I'm not in chemo right now. I need to be in chemo. That person's in chemo. You start thinking weird things. Anything else that I want? Being an inspiration. Being an inspiration is weird. I have really actually loved hearing from people that I am a comfort, an inspiration, that I'm cool, all of the various positive things that I've heard from close people and less close people. My mother has said to me very, very regularly how amazingly brave she thinks I am, and I love hearing it from her. I love hearing it from her. But I also feel weird about being called brave by certain people. It's weird. It is weird. I have loved hearing from you all that you find me comforting or interesting or whatever. That's why I'm making this video partially. But it can be weird. Basically what it amounts to is I want to be myself. I want to be myself, and I want to put something out of myself. And if you like it, you like it. I am realizing that I'm living this cancer like an artist. And this is my product. My product is me. And you're either gonna like it, you're gonna resonate with it or not. If you're gonna say something, mean it. And when it's meant, when it's specific to me or to you also, then it is so meaningful. And when it's just a, there, it feels bad. The question, how are you? I have been so thankful to have people checking in on me very, very regularly or irregularly, frequently, infrequently, deeply, not deeply. I have loved it, and it's wonderful. And yet, being asked, how are you in January, sucked, because I feel personally completely unable not to offer full truths about something, or at least as full as possible in a short period of time. So I absolutely could not get myself to say, fine, thank you. I felt like I needed to get into the details of, actually, I'm feeling really bad right now because chemo isn't working and I'm terrified. But I didn't want to get into it. So how are you is a beautiful question. It can also be a fraught question. I think that also brings me to the concept of flexibility for myself and for people around me. As much flexibility as you can possibly have, I think, is helpful. If you are seeing somebody who is currently going through a major life event and is sick, try to be as accommodating as possible to their needs. Try to help them exactly on their terms. That is certainly my case. For me, it's not the thought that counts. For me, it's the result that counts. And I'm particularly pernickety about it, I think. So it would serve me better to be more flexible. I've definitely seen the limitations of my ability to be a good cancer patient be linked to my own inflexibility. That has been why I've had so hard a time with waiting. If you want to help somebody who is currently sick, whether it's with cancer or not, show up on their terms as much as possible. There's obviously going to be some compromise that needs to happen, but show up on their terms. I didn't need to call upon too much help from kind of my broader community, people making food for me and things like this, partially because I was able to do a lot of things for myself even when I was quite tired, but partially because I had the luxury of a mother who could afford to take just swathes of time off to help me, to come live with me and do cleaning for me, food prep for me. So I didn't need too much from kind of the like second or third ring of community. But I definitely got a lot of help in just kind of the purely logistical things. Speaking of logistics, if you want to know how to help a cancer patient or somebody going through a major medical thing, offer to do schedule work for them, offer to be their secretary if you have it in your toolbox, because so much of cancer treatment, and of course especially in the United States with insurance as it is in the United States, is about dealing with appointment times and fighting for things and remembering things and sending things out. And I had a few people who I think know that offered to help me. I didn't really need too much help, but it's not impossible that in the future I might not delegate. Surround yourself with people who are willing to talk about death and who are willing to talk about suffering. And if you want to help somebody who is suffering in one way or another, be willing to talk about hard stuff. Be willing to set aside some of your own squeamishness. You don't have to set it aside completely. And in fact, it can be a conversation, depending, of course, on your relationship with the person who's sick. I have found it very, very fruitful to talk about also the difficulties that my mother has been facing. It's been good for me to talk with her about what it's like on her end of things as well, because I didn't feel like she imposed on me something. She wasn't kind of bringing her baggage too much to my baggage. And I think that's tremendously important. And finally, how has this changed me? In many ways, not. And by design, I have, as I mentioned, tried to remain kind of deliberately and maybe obtusely myself. But that said, I don't know how it's going to change me in the future. I'm currently freaked out, actually. After the initial optimism and enthusiasm of, okay, we're starting the new treatment, nothing negative has happened since then. We're just waiting. But again, as I said, we're now in the difficult waiting stage. It is really a black box process. So I don't have the effervescence of relief of getting to start treatment again buoying me. And I've started feeling kind of depressed and lonely and scared again. It's manageable, and it's been helpful to talk about it with people, but I don't know. And if this treatment doesn't work, it will be okay, because I will get over it. But I'm going to be very depressed at the end of April if this treatment doesn't work. And I know that. I'm partially kind of preparing myself for that. I also know that there are some things that I'm going to kind of have to unpack for months and years to come. And I don't know in what ways those will affect me. So I'm going to leave that open-ended. I didn't cover nearly everything that I could say or even wanted to say, but I think it's going to have to be where I leave things off. If you have additional questions, I tried to answer, I think, everything that people ask me either in DMs or in comments to my post on YouTube. But if you have additional questions, leave me a comment. I'll try to answer there. Thank you for watching. Thank you for following me. Thank you for supporting me. I hope this was interesting, helpful, entertaining, something. Voila. That's all I've got for you. Bye.